I'm so OCD, I let the intrusive thoughts win. And then when people talk about actual intrusive thoughts, about stuff.
Hey, I'm Dr. Julie. I'm a board certified psychiatrist, and this video I think is so good because there are times in mental health where language and definitions really matter. And I would say outside of bipolar disorder, people using that term in mania, using that incorrectly, I think people using OCD like just flippantly and incorrectly is probably one of the ones that I see, misused probably the most. So oftentimes when I hear people saying like, oh, I'm so OCD, they're really referencing what is likely like obsessive compulsive personality disorder traits, meaning they're very like orderly and want things in a certain fashion. That's usually what I hear people talking about. They're really not talking about obsessive compulsive disorder. So for those of you who don't know, obsessions are like repetitive, intrusive thoughts. They're unwanted thoughts, and they can come out of nowhere for people. Like you could just be going about your day and get this very vivid thought that you do not want to be there. And compulsions are like repetitive behaviors, and oftentimes they go together. So the obsessive thought, the intrusive thought that you don't want, is followed by a compulsive repetitive behavior that you're doing to kind of get rid of the thought or decrease the thought, to kind of deal with the anxiety of that unwanted thought being there. But you can actually have OCD with just obsessions or just compulsive behaviors, but oftentimes you'll see them going together. And I think that is misused because oftentimes when I see it like in popular media, I would say we're typically seeing like contamination. So we'll see, right, a person who has intrusive thoughts about germs or, becoming sick, for example, and then their compulsive behaviors are around like hand washing or avoidance of people or surfaces. That's how I see it, most often in, the public sphere or TV or something. But what we don't see is people who have these intrusive thoughts that are about, violence. And when I say that, I'm talking about people can have very vivid, intrusive scenes or thoughts about either harming someone or just scenes about like people maybe who've been like harmed in some way, very bloody scenes. Like it'll be very vivid in their mind, just coming to them. It might be of people they know or things that they've done. It can be like sexual in nature. And again, it may often be very like something very taboo, or just something very like distressing or disturbing. Again, that's what makes it like so intrusive and unwanted. And then sometimes just like very like religiously oriented. That's something I don't hear talked about a lot, like kind of mixed in there. Again, sometimes for people who even aren't maybe like that oriented, which again I think is why it can be like so confusing or distressing. Like, why am I having these very kind of intrusive religious kind of oriented thoughts when I'm not, even a person who's a churchgoer or something? I do not hear that talked about publicly as much. And again, I think it's because, they're taboo topics, right? And people who tend to have those thoughts can be very frightened by them, very afraid of them, it makes them, what the people who I've treated genuinely have questioned themselves, like, where is this thought coming from? Like, why am I having it? What does it say about me that I'm having this thought? And I think even just given the education, like that thought is the thought, it's not you, it's the thought that's having, it's the illness, and then getting treatments for that. The treatments can be medication, and there are, evidence-based psychotherapies to address OCD that can be helpful. People at times can have obsessive compulsive disorder, though. It can get very bad to where people can lose breaks with reality. They can actually develop to a point of like psychosis. And so that would be a very severe OCD, but I have treated people who've gotten to that point. So it can be a very severe, debilitating condition. It can get to the point where people are afraid to leave their home because of the thoughts they're having and a fear that they're going to act out on it, even if they don't want to. They may have no history of being violent, no history of ever harming anyone, but I'm telling you, that's how strong and vivid the thoughts are, that it can become like very disabling to people. So it really is a very severe condition, and it's not one to just be joked about. Oh, I'm just so OCD. No, you're not. You're not. You might have OCPD. Look that up if you never heard of it. Obsessive compulsive personality disorder, and you might have some traits of that disorder. And honestly, as much as people even joke about that disorder can be very disabling as well. People who truly have obsessive compulsive personality disorder, just like any other personality disorder, there are, ranges of that too. And people who are very rigid and inflexible, people who are on that personality disorder spectrum, just like all the other ones, can have degrees of impairment in that as well. Okay. But that is a different condition than OCD. And most people, when they're talking about being OCD, you're not talking about being OCD. You're generally talking about something else that really is not what OCD is. And so thank you for bringing to the creator of this video for just bringing more awareness to this. And I really do hope that it drives people to stop saying things like, I let the intrusive thoughts win, because it really is misinformation, and it's really driving and increasing the stigma for people who have OCD.